This is the Londinium Vectis, and I'm gonna tell you right up front, this machine kind of sucked me in. It is, I hope rather obviously, a lever espresso machine, and that's very different than what you might normally think of when you think of an espresso machine. When you think of an espresso machine, it's very likely you're thinking of a pump-driven espresso machine. And on a pump-driven espresso machine, you press a little button, and it starts a motor which starts to pull your shot of espresso. Usually these days they come with a lot of different settings, menus, sometimes they come with screens or apps. This machine is very different than that. It doesn't have a lot of those bells and whistles. It doesn't really even have a lot of moving parts at all. All you have really is this power switch right here to turn your machine on or off. You can turn the steam on or off with this knob right here, and then you have the giant lever with which to pull a shot. And the really cool thing about it is when you pull this lever down, it's gonna pre-infuse your puck. The machine is on, it's running, you can't hear anything. And then once you start to see that it is fully pre-infused, you're gonna let the lever up gently, and it's gonna pull a shot of espresso totally silently. Now there are a couple different types of lever espresso machines. There's what's called direct levers. The Olympia Cremina is an example of this, where you're actually using that lever to kind of force the water down through the puck. And this type of espresso machine is a little bit different. It's called a spring lever espresso machine. And what happens when you use this and you pull down that lever is you're actually cocking up a spring. Now this one is what's called a dipper design. So when you pull up that spring, it's gonna start letting water into this part here called the group. And that happens because there's pressure in the boiler. And that pressure that is built up kind of forces the water out through here, fills up the group. You can pre-infuse the puck or to whatever degree that you want. Then when you let go of the lever, that spring is going to come down on the water and it forces the water through. And I have to say, the result of all that, it's really good. Now, spring levers have a couple big advantages. Number one is they're very consistent. So that pressure created by that spring, it's never gonna change, it's never gonna shift, it's constant. There's none of this push-pull that you sometimes can get with a pump. Second, they are incredibly mechanically simple, which makes them very reliable. But what about this spring lever in particular, the Vectis? Well, first, I want to give a big shout out to my buddy Jake at Homebrew Coffee on Instagram, who loaned me this to do a review on it. It's made by Londinium, which is a relatively small manufacturer that's based in the UK. And if you hang out in espresso world for any length of time, it's not going to be very long before you hear the name Londinium. In fact, there's a machine that's kind of almost the exact antithesis to a machine like this called the Decent Espresso Machine, a very incredible espresso machine in its own right, super programmable, lots of sensors, you can adjust like literally everything on it. And one of the most popular profiles that that machine can run is, you guessed it, the Londinium profile. Now, Decent owners will tell you it is an excellent replication of the espresso profile that a machine like this will pull off. And Londinium owners, they might take slight offense to that statement and tell you it does an absolutely terrible job of replicating it. And to that, all I have to say is, let me know what you think in the comments. The workmanship on these machines is absolutely incredible. You can just tell by looking at the inside and the outside and drinking the espresso for that matter, that this is a company that takes pride in what they do, and they do things the way they do with conviction. Now, Londinium makes a line of commercial espresso machines as well as kind of super premium home machines. And this espresso machine, the Vectis, is kind of the very entry level of, well, of their line anyways. Whether or not you want to consider entry level at around $2,000 US, that's up to you. But as far as Londinium goes, this is their entry level model. It's got kind of this tight form factor, a 1.8 liter boiler, this 4-hole steam wand, and not a lot else, to be honest. In fact, it's probably quicker to say what the Vectis doesn't have. You know, it doesn't have an adjustable PID per se. The pressure of the spring as it comes down is not really adjustable. There's no volumetric programming. There's no time-based programming. There's no app. There's no screen where you can adjust anything. There's no sleep or wake schedule. There's no standby. It's almost crazy. Like, it doesn't even have a water reservoir. If you want to refill the boiler, you need to depressurize it, stick a funnel into the top of the boiler, refill it manually, then let it come back up to temperature. It really is kind of like a no frills. It does what it does, and it's not making any apologies along the way. Now, to understand lever espresso machines, you kind of need to take everything that you think you know about espresso from pump-driven machines and kind of just set it aside for a minute and allow yourself to think about things a little bit differently. For example, it's going to pull at a lot lower pressure than most pump machines will typically be programmed at, and that pressure is actually going to drop off significantly over the course of the shot. Temperature-wise, it's a very similar story. It's going to start off a lot hotter than you might expect, and then again, tail off throughout the course of the espresso shot. You know, both of those things, if they were to happen on a pump-driven machine, that could be, you know, kind of rough in your espresso shot. But somehow on this, it just comes together in this perfect concert of absolutely delicious espresso. It's got this charm and magic that are almost as a result of its simplicity. Like, there's really not a lot you can do with it aside from walk up to it, it's set how it's been set, you pull the lever down, you pre-infuse your espresso, and you let it pull. It's gonna do what it does, and the espresso is very likely going to be quite delicious, provided you're using a great grinder, of course. And not only that, but it's going to be very consistent and forgiving every single time. Like, it almost seems like magic that it's got all these quirks, and the temperature is doing what you would think is something funny, and same with the pressure. And then it just comes out in this amazingly delicious espresso shot. Now, there are a couple things that you can kind of adjust on a machine like the Vectis. Number one is how long you pre-infuse. So if you're pulling the lever down, you know, if you want to do a shorter or almost no pre-infusion, you can pull a short shot, say like 30 grams, something in there, depending on how big of a dose you're using. Or you could pull a much longer shot where you really let it pre-infuse over a long period of time. You pull a longer ratio, and then, you know, you're getting up to like a 50 or more gram shot depending on how long you're letting it pre-infuse. Also, it's got a part inside called the Pstat, which is something that actually regulates the pressure in the boiler and just the way pressure works. If you're doing that, it's also going to allow you to adjust the temperature of the boiler. So if you want to do, you know, very modern style espresso with light roasts, you're going to want to set that pressure to be a little bit higher. And if you're more into darker roasts, you're going to want to set that to be a little bit lower. Now, as much as I have thoroughly enjoyed my experience using this machine, there are a couple reasons why you just might want to strike it off your list entirely. If you're like a tweaker, like an adjuster when it comes to your espresso or your coffee, like you want to pull a shot and then you want to get in there and adjust some settings so that your next shot hopefully comes out better than the way you want, and that's really a fun process for you, this is going to give you great coffee, but it's a very different experience than that. Second, I'm gonna say you're really gonna get the most out of an espresso machine like this if you're even just a little bit mechanically inclined. If that kind of stuff makes you really uncomfortable, you're not going to feel comfortable probably tuning this machine to its maximum potential. You know, getting in there and adjusting the Pstat, you gotta take the body panels off, and as easy as it is to work on, the whole experience is very tactile and mechanical. Now, several parts were updated on the Vectis by Londinium since it launched, and in the process of doing this review, I thought, hey, I would love to replace those parts. So Jake sent me along a couple, you know, an updated seal design, an updated Pstat design, and without a lot of issue, I had those swaps made in a very short amount of time. It really is a nice machine to work on, quick machine to work on, not a lot that you feel like you're gonna break. Like, the workmanship on this machine really is nice. Lastly, and I hope this is kind of obvious, But one thing that may cause you to strike a machine off your list is this giant lever right here. You know, it's not gonna fit under an upper set of cabinets. So depending on where you wanna put your machine, that may dictate whether or not you wanna even look at a machine like this. You know, wherever it is, it needs a little bit more headroom above it, and it kind of makes a bit of a statement. Now, leading up to this review, I've actually been considering a decent espresso machine. You know, I review a lot of equipment, I capture a lot of data, I'm always doing tests, and I'm still considering it for that reason. However, when I started using this, it's a different story for me when I've been woken up at, say, 5:30 a.m. by my kids, and I come stumbling out of my room and having that experience of I'm still rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. I don't have to think about absolutely anything. I can pull a shot with a machine and have some of the most exquisite espresso that I've ever tasted in a way that's almost totally brainless. That is an experience. And that's what you're kind of getting when you get a machine like this. It keeps you in a box, but to be honest, you're kind of pretty happy while you're in there. In fact, let me just show you how easy it is to use this espresso machine. My wife, Sarah, she's never pulled a shot of espresso, and I let her try using this after watching me just one time. Have you ever done this before?
No.
No? Have you ever seen me do it?
Yes.
Yes? We'll dump it all in. Okay.
That was kind of fun.
All right. So you have almost this kind of beautiful paradox with a machine like the Vectis. It's undeniably mechanical and tactile. You want to baby it like a vintage motorcycle. Like you wake up, you want to make sure it's nice and polished. You want to kind of take care of it. But then when you go to make espresso, all of that mechanical complexity, it just kind of steps out of the way. And you're left with an incredibly simple, an incredibly forgiving, and an incredibly delicious cup of coffee. Now, I want to know what you think of the Vectis. Do you find the limitation appealing or frustrating? Would you be comfortable paying this much for a machine that has, on paper anyway, fewer features than something that costs a similar amount? Do you like the lever look? What would your spouse think if you came home with this machine? Let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, happy brewing.